It is a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Sharik and the IUPUY School of Philanthropy for lending me your academic ear and for your inclusivity and opportunity to give my paper a platform that forms this concept and praxis, which is formed of a praxis and of concept and praxis. The title is called A Sustainable Human, Stewardship and Philanthropy with the Value of Green, another subtitle, Balance, God, and Environment. My name is Uzma Mirza, and I am a professional architect. I have my own practice called An Architect Studio. I'm an artist. I've commissioned work all over the country, and I'm a founder of the Pi Foundation, which I'm representing in today's symposium, and which is also representative with the paper that I have written. The three disciplines were my the three disciplines as the architecture, artist, and the foundation, where my writings serve as the fourth score. So this, what I'm going to talk about is, I call it the fourth score, are the weave instrumental in the making of a sustainable human. Stewardship and philanthropy with the value of green, balance, God, environment. This work espouses an important concept that unraveled during my variegated works throughout my career and even when I was in college doing my thesis, and travels as a core value I believe needs addressing in order to build a more balanced world, like the Eureka of Archimedes when he ran down the street with clothes on. So I was questioned by some friends, why do I do what I do? As I explored this question, and with the impact after 9/11, specifically when I used to live in Connecticut, I wrote a 98,000-word treatise of prose and verse, which I'm not going to share with you, don't worry. And so it is a work in progress, and in addition, I have an Islamic art book of prose and verse, one that I'm sharing with you, and the second is in the work in progress. This forms a chapter of that book that I'm submitting with the School of Philanthropy and to you as a paper. So primarily I'd like to share a few excerpts from the paper that I've submitted. So just dive right into it. The painting that you see on my left, your right, is Vitruvian Man by Leonardo da Vinci. And Vitruvian Man actually by Leonardo formed the core of what the Enlightenment age and the Age of Renaissance was. So keep that in mind as we go forward. And I call that the Promethean, Renaissance, and modern man. I know there's a definition of modern man, but I look at modern man, I define it as of today, and not just what is called modern man. So to not be is to be a sustainable human, where forbearance and resilience, not disquietude, amidst a world against reason or war, is a key to being a philanthropic steward. In today's world and the various worlds throughout history, there has always existed a world against reason. A human who steps off the stages of illusion that I call the medias, as a philanthropic steward defined with an inclusive perspective and contextual review, is to be a sustainable human, not a man, as modern man, as we have made it into. And Baconian logic defined that during Descartes' time, and then Baconian, I'm sure you all know this, and he basically dissected nature, which meant dissecting women, dissecting everyone into compartments, into a zoo of things. I am negating that in this paper because I believe our disciplines all reflect that other view of things, of the world. So it's a sustainable human, not a man, and whose mind and body is awakened both spiritually and physically. This human's disposition and philanthropic action is neither of the East nor of the West, but a universal in principle, yet with a contextual ethos that encourages the building of a sustainable human. What is philanthropic stewardship? In its essence, it must entail philanthropy with stewardship as a verb in a state of becoming, in a civil society with balance, accountability, inclusivity within a contextual review as a helping hand. It is where financial gain is not more important than a spiritual and physical nourishment that teaches a community to fish or to be sustainable based on a contextual understanding in lieu of just a handout of fish. And many people, even in the Muslim world, hand out fish. It's time for Ramadan, let's hand out fish. Let's hand out things, and you understand the metaphor I speak of. Hence, this makes each society sustainable if we teach them with context in mind, and which includes, and I am putting forth that we need to include the other, and the other being the Islamic perspective in philanthropic action, and not just a footnote of walking through as they helped the Western world. Because it was, which I argue further in the paper, it was the Age of Enlightenment and the Renaissance that actually was the impetus from the Middle Ages to the Age of Enlightenment to the Vitruvian man that came from the Islamic world. Example, paper, as Jonathan Bloom talks about. The use of paper, because to propagate just the knowledge of the Quran, they used paper before print, and he goes extensively talking about it. So basically, I'm looking at the Islamic perspective. So sadly, today, as I mentioned, even the other Islamic perspective has forgotten the beauty and mandate of its own philanthropic stewardship to remind it. The sustainable human is the obverse of the Promethean Renaissance modern man, a man crusading against the sustainable human, portraying him and her as weak, which must be neutralized and renewed to envision our human disciplines and philanthropic actions in the world. The sustainable human's tone is not a reaction, but an action. We're not being. So I'm saying not to be or not to be, as Hamlet would say, but to not be is to be, and to get off your stages of illusions of what we've created in order to be the opposite of what has become a Vitruvian man, which led to nihilistic theories, to Kant's work, etc., which I believe I had a discussion. I believe Nietzsche believed in God from my reading some scholars, because I think it's another topic. We can talk about it later, but primarily the sustainable human in the other perspective, the Islamic perspective, refuses to be an enemy with our humanity, but is basically fulfilling the trust that he or she has been given. So in the Muslim world, taking care of the natural world is actually a trust. So I say philanthropic stewardship, it's a stewardship, but philanthropy is actually required. I know many Muslims and Muslim communities, well, zakat is a taxation, and the sadaqah and fidya and all of these are not. You can give it, but no. Once you are a conscious person, as in the Muslim world, you must preserve and conserve as the Khalifa of your creator, your architect, as I call it, the designer, and because you're fulfilling the trust. You are a steward. So philanthropic action needs to be not just voluntary, if you take a perspective which should be inclusive, which is the other. This society we have is part of the other, and we cannot dislocate it. Unfortunately, it has become the reverse today. Jean-Jacques Rousseau said, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains." Today, globally, modern man is in chains with a disguised freedom for a small population on Earth, unshackling human-made one-eyed definitions, which can result in a holistic, and unshackling these human-made one-eyed definitions. I consider this looking at things in a one-eyed perspective instead of the two eyes that we have been given to create a focus, can result in a holistic view of philanthropic action that builds its communities with inclusivity and stewardship, and teaches them based on their context. If the view of man is understood holistically, again, as from a man to an insan, or a human, in the Islamic world, the word for man is not man. That's a Western overlap. It's actually human. And the medieval interpretations of even the Quran, to this day, they say human. It's not, and they're changing it. It's actually in Arabic, human. And a sustainable human, not the Renaissance man, has to be the measure we need to look at if we really, I believe, if we want to do philanthropy, include others in what we say and do. Today, humanity on a global level can no longer sustain itself with a non-inclusive lens, which is primarily an evolved collage of the classical Promethean Renaissance modern man, and now postmodern man, and whatever contemporary that we have become, and we are becoming. And we're going very mechanized. If many of you have children who are teenagers or not, when was the last time they actually spoke to somebody? as opposed to texting them. And it's really scary what the direction that we're heading. So it's not postmodern man framed by one-eyed point of view of science, cosmology, astronomy, medicine, history, philosophy, art, ecology, spirituality, etc., and so forth. And the scientific method, and with the approach to the scientific method, insatiable, unaccountable, it was primarily an insatiable and unaccountable use and hoarding of natural resources, and people were the other perspective, which had influenced the making of such a man, had been discounted. And I am part of that other, and I am not taught that in school. Why? And I believe, just like what Mr. Trump is doing right now, we absorb that type of thinking. So for someone to say that Orientalism does not matter and other doesn't matter, it does matter, because my pedagogy of the school aspect is influenced by that, as is this paper. So after 9/11, this work came, as I mentioned earlier, it came that we need to redefine that. And yes, to some it's academic terms, but if our academics change, the way we approach how we teach our children, the future children, and educational systems, it will change the mindset of everyone, what I believe. So even the other cultures, so this paper puts forth that the other perspective to be included in thought process and stewardship as a philanthropic steward, which includes the other perspective, even though the other culture's religion is part of the Abrahamic faith, was a prime impetus and influencer, and many have proven initial developers of what became known as the Western Renaissance and Age of Enlightenment. And this is throughout art history, which I'm very familiar with, and philosophy, that the Age of Enlightenment was influenced. And there's a lot of scholarship written on it, but the purpose of the paper is not to debate that history. But there are many scholarships that have been written on that aspect of history. So to understand, essentially, is the raison d'etre of the universe and our place in it as a humanity. We must carefully stride our actions, the tools of balance, with material body, and balance spiritual, the self, and the mind. Alongside, to know the concept of our design. I believe the black hole is known right in the eye. The answers are right here, but we are out there looking. And it's amazing, if any of you go into mathematics, you can actually find all these principles are there. It's a matter of these geniuses who discover them. So the Western perspective of philanthropy takes a central root from the 5th century through Aeschylus's Greek play, Prometheus Bound. So it's where philanthropy is a synthesis of philos, that which is loved, beloved, and endearment, and important. And anthropos, a human being alongside hope, being an optimistic approach to building our fellow human beings. Although the view of philanthropy has evolved, however, today a new and clear understanding of philanthropic action needs to be established, which is inclusive and contextual in helping build a sustainable human community, and inevitably self. A vengeful humanity challenging God cannot sustain us either, or it can only deteriorate the fabric of our optimism into a whirlwind of materialism solely embedded in matter. Ironically, the myth of Prometheus can be further viewed in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I'm sure all of you know all this. But Frankenstein actually was depicting the descent of mankind and reverberating the pending havoc to come to modern man. It's happening, a frightening foreshadowing of the descent of man that is today being fulfilled. This paper also argues that philanthropy may become part of that descent, a descent that has been gradual. It does not change its philanthropic action to be inclusive of the other perspective and universal with context in mind. We are going to lead to our own demise. However, on an optimistic note, I believe there are millions of sustainable humans is what I'm saying we need to redefine, review. So in the other or Islamic perspective, the word for man, as I mentioned, is insan, which means human. But unfortunately, the medieval translations have used this in an incorrect fashion. From the natural world, just to give you an idea quickly, and I'm sure many of you know of this, from the Islamic perspective, the natural world is a canvas upon which God has painted for humanity a home called universe, bestowed a sanctified palette which, through fluid, geometric, and mathematical patterns of his reflected divine light, is a trust, or al-amana, to humanity, a trust that must be preserved through the philanthropic efforts, deeds as laid out in the Quran, which is really rooting it down back to humanity. When you read carefully, it's not an other. It is actually very common to all faiths. The earth, the universe, is the first mosque. So I begin the entire paper from a saying of the Prophet that he said, the earth has been made sacred and pure and a mosque for me. Metaphorically, the whole universe is to be preserved. We are trustees, and in the Islamic perspective, God said, hey, I have this universe, and man said, hey, I can do it. Hence, he didn't realize how arrogant he is. So we're pretty arrogant already, and we need to realize, we have to be careful, because there's amazing hope in all of us. We have so much good in us that we can change that, and we are, and there are people doing it. So primarily, the earth, the universe, is the first mosque. Splendidly, as a sign of God's mercy, the earth has a unique thin biosphere membrane, the only in the universe, the sustaining and protecting precious life created and bestowed by God to humankind as a vicegerent or a steward, Khalifa. And within this natural canvas is the home of the first mosque, where the panorama of the natural world are its walls, the sky, the ceiling, and the earth its sacred ground upon which a Muslim prostrates to God in daily supplication. Essentially, the awe-inspiring wonders of the natural world is a sanctuary upon which are the signs, ayahs, that assist the seeking supplicant as a navigator, astronomer, scientist, teacher, student, engineer, and so on and so forth in the world as a trustee. We, each one of us, are trustees, not answerable to anyone with free will, except to our Creator. And according to the Muslim perspective, and we need to fulfill that. So in philanthropy, I'm saying stewardship as a philanthropic action needs to be inclusive with contextual aspects. NGOs going into other countries, they did, for example, there's an example in Africa. A group an NGO went and built water wells. They're doing a great job. But the problem is they didn't understand gender separation, where they put the well on the men's side and it's the women who get the water. And women won't get the water because the men and women don't interact. These small little things are important for people to know about how people are in each society. Same thing with the green movement. Ironically, the green movement today is green. And so I will get on the green aspect in 2 seconds, but green really refers to balance. In Taoist philosophy, to be in balance is called an action towards non-action, or in Chinese, wu wei. By non-action, everything can be done, which means let everything be allowed to do what it naturally does, so that its nature will be satisfied, and abstain from action which is in opposition to human nature or the natural pattern. So basically, in the Muslim world, the universe, in the other's view, contains a treasure of science. And amazingly, the root of compassion, rahma, means womb. And in Arabic, which implies the compassionate and mercy and unconditional love of a mother for her child, hence all of creation is a mercy. So for the Muslim perspective, praying on it, you must preserve it. So essentially, what I would like to, because I'm running out of time, Vitruvian man, it didn't go through. How do I get rid of this? Where does it say slide? Oh. So essentially, this is a sustainable human, which is, in the Quran there's a parable of the tree, which is about a sustainable human. It's like a goodly tree, it reflects goodly actions and goodly words. And it has 5 names of the Creator, so there's a type of calligraphy. You have it in the book that you have as well. And it took time for me to realize this, very important. I realized the essence after my father passed away. And this is an unsustainable human. It's called WAR, or World Against Reason, the acronym. And it says, to not be is to be. So here is modern man, one-eyed blind, created a computer chip. If you look at it in plan view, and then you look at the trees in plan view, and the calligraphy is within it, and it's the heart is caught, so the hearts are basically fashioned to the molds and materialism of what we are, even though we have a spiritual inner divine something. Even Maria Montessori talked about that the child is the armament of peace. And in my paper, I do refer to her because the knowledge is an essence of the Islamic perspective. And Maria Montessori discovered, she used to be a nun, and in a Catholic nun. She left that, and she discovered, she was a physician, from mentally retarded children, she discovered that there is more that a 3-year-old can learn to read and write, and it comes from another source, a divine source. So we cannot keep disproving very nihilistic approaches of nothing. There is something else in us, and we need to do, or I believe our philanthropy needs to look at. We don't want, this is not to be. It's basically like an eyeball, but it's also a computer chip, and I mentioned, and it's basically running our earth dry. And then this is compassion. So it's about the verses from the Quran that talk about compassion. So I take, two examples. One is art, the Pen and Inkpot Foundation. It's about rediscovering the inner aspect. And the foundation that I'm representing, the Pen and Inkpot Foundation, it's a philanthropy, and in it, the acronym is called SEEK. And so the art is actually used in its selling to fund it, in addition to patrons, in addition to other donors. So in a way, I am giving and they're giving towards philanthropic action to help the society. And then that funds is used for elsewhere. For example, we have 2 scholarships, and one of them is actually with the IUPUI School of Education. Another is after my parents, Dr. Uzma Mirza and Shanaz Mirza Scholarship, which is based on giving to the needy. And so primarily, I'm coming from theory. I'm looking at what I wrote, sharing it with you, as well as praxis. And I hope I got my point across, and should probably end. Thank you.